Hey guys, welcome back to Planet Mithril Paints. Today we're going to be showing you how to paint the undisputed true hero of Middle-earth, Mr. Samwise Gamgee himself, and the final hobbit we have to paint before we commence our trip to the land of Mordor. So without further delay, sit back, relax and enjoy the video. Start off by base coating Sam's face, hands and hobbit feet with Bugman's Glow. Don't forget to capture the backs of the ankles, his pointy ears and fingers gripping the sword. Layer over all the flesh with a 50-50 mix of Bugman's Glow and Cadian flesh tone. Once the wash is dry, reapply the previous mixture as a second layer, being careful to try to leave the raglan flesh shades showing in the deepest recesses around the eyes, nose, cheeks, mouth and between the fingers and toes. Highlight with pure Cadian flesh tone. Samwise has a slightly more portly appearance to that of his kin, so we want to try and create a slight roundness to his face to portray this accurately. The sculpt helps massively, so all you have to do is to follow the definition of the model. At this point you also want to create some definition between the fingers and toes. Apply another highlight to the upper areas with a mix of Cadian flesh tone and pallid witch flesh, again leaving enough of the previous layer showing underneath to create natural depth and shadow. Finally, apply a pinpoint highlight by adding more pallid witch flesh to the mix. Focus this on areas such as the tip and bridge of the nose, brow, chin and the most pronounced parts of cheekbones and the knuckle joins over the fingers. Carefully pick out Sam's eyes using Abaddon Black as a base and applying 2 pinpoint dots of pallid witch flesh either side. Make sure you have a really fine point to your brush to avoid any wayward pupils. Base coat Sam's hair with Xandri dust. Don't forget the hair on his feet either. We want to create some differentiation between Sam and Merry, who is the other blonde hobbit in the group. Sam has a very sandy look to his hair, so we're going to try and recreate this with a few different paints. Apply a layer with a mix of Xandri dust and Talon sand. This will keep the richness of the blonde, but the Talon sand adds just a degree of sandiness that we want for the finished hair. Once the wash is dried, reapply the previous mix, this time being careful to pick out individual hair strands across his scalp. Again, like with the face, leaving the Agravax earth shade showing in the recesses to create natural depth. For the first highlight stage, add some padded witch flesh to the mix. Follow the method for the previous layering step, but now this time keep your highlights tighter and smaller to create the impression of light bouncing off his sandy golden locks. Add more padded witch flesh to the mix for the final highlight, which will be focused mainly on the tips and outer curls of the hair. Carefully pick out Sam's undershirt with Rakarth flesh. You may need to apply a few thinner coats in order for this to maintain a smooth finish. Apply a layer to the upper folds of material with a mix of Rakarth flesh and padded witch flesh. Finally, apply our edge highlight to the outermost folds of material with pure padded witch flesh. Now you can carefully pick out the 3 buttons across his shirt. Rebase each one with Abaddon black and carefully dot highlight them with Sycorax bronze. Each of our 4 brave hobbits has their own unique feel to them, brought about by their clothes and colours they sport throughout the film, but also have a sense of unity as a species due to the richness and earthiness of their garb. We want to make sure every one of our hobbits has its own distinct character on the tabletop and doesn't get lost amongst the others. As Sam is a gardener, we're going to be using a variety of greens and earthy tones to best capture how he looks in the films. The base coat is outer jacket, start off with a mix of Death Corpse drab and drier bark. Add a small amount of the messy desert to the mix for the first layer and start separating apart some of the large areas of fabric, leaving the base coat showing in the deepest recesses on the model. The Zamesi brings up the tone of the green more naturally and subtly than a lighter green would at this point. Continue to add gradually increasing amounts of the messy desert to this mix for the next highlight stage. Here you want to focus on drawing the paint more towards the outer folds of the material, leaving the previous layer showing in the creases and the folds. Now you're going to call us mad, but hear us out. For the next highlight stage, you want to push these already defined highlights further by adding a very small amount of Snarsnick green to the mix, bringing the overall mixture to an approximate 85%-15% split between the original mix and the Snarsnick. It's important here not to add too much of the Snarsnick, as we don't want the coat to suddenly become luminous with the introduction of such a vibrant hue to the mix. Finally, for the edge highlight, add more Snarsnik green to the mix and focus on the most pronounced areas of material, as well as down the lapels and the trim of the coat. Your mixture at this point should be approximately 70% the original base mix and 30% Snarsnik green. Snarsnik green is your best friend for this model, in our opinion, but can quite easily become your bane, so use sparingly and add gradually to avoid any jarring colour contrasts. Base coat Sam's trousers with a 50-50 mix of Abaddon black and Storm Vermin fur. Once the wash is dried, layer over again with the previous mix, leaving the base layer showing in the recesses and where the shadow would fall based on his stance. Finally, edge highlight the trousers with pure Storm Vermin fur. We're going to be using a very similar method to paint Sam's cloak, but using a different green and brown as a base coat to create a natural contrast between this and his jacket while still maintaining those subtle earthy tones we're striving for. Start by painting Sam's cloak with a mix of Lupercal green and Rhinox hide. As we did with the jacket, add a small amount of Zamesi Desert to the mix and layer over the entire cloak. We're using Zamesi Desert again to ensure that the finished cloak, although a different hue, will tie in with the jacket once finished. Continue to add more Zamesi Desert to the mix and push the highlights to the outer folds of the cloak. The material folds were very well defined, so if you do get stuck, just let the model be your guide. And now again, as with the jacket, we're going to be adding our Snarsnick green to the mix to lighten the tone of the cloak and create some natural light across the outer folds of material. Finally, add more Snarsnick for the final edge highlight. Again, focus this on the outermost fold of the cloak, the tips of his hood, and the trim that curls around both sides of his body. Carefully pick out the straps, Sam's belt and backpack with dryad bark. Once the wash is dry, apply an edge highlight with pure Gawthor brown. Paint Sam's sword, any buckles and brooches, the cooking pot and his trusty frying pan on his back with lead belcher. Once the Nuln Oil is dried, apply an edge highlight with Runefang steel. Now we're going to pick out the final details across Sam's backpack. To paint the bedroll we used Dark Reaper. We went for a subtle blue for the bedroll just to add a spot colour and to slightly break up all the greens and browns we've already used across the model. Next, layer over the bedroll with Thunderhawk blue. Finally, edge highlight the bedroll with Fenrisian Grey. Sam has a number of hanging pouches dangling from his pack. We painted these with Steel Legion drab. Once the wash is dry, carefully highlight them with the Messy Desert, which is your second best friend for this video, and to our dismay, there were no strings of sausages on this sculpt of Sam. Sad times indeed.